Mr. Career Crossover is not in the house because he's up in Georgia dealing with a little bit of frost, but he's doing that D&I initiative that he does with the University of Georgia, just sharing and dropping knowledge on them, dropping them buckets. And the theme of our show, because Kevin Carr represents Pro to CEO, which is the career crossover, which allows professional athletes to transition into the professional world, become CEOs. And his philosophy revolves around champions. And the I in champion stands for ingenuity. So our guest today is going to represent a little bit about ingenuity and how we do. But before we jump into our guests, let's talk about what's going on in the world of sports and entertainment. Well, right now, my Brooklyn Nets are gelling, baby. Kyrie is like, I don't want to do the point anymore. Harden, run the point, baby, so I could just drop buckets and put it on people and then let Kevin Durant do his thing. And now the Lakers, it seems like our boy Anthony is going to be out for this season. They might hold him out for the season. So it's all good because I want my Brooklyn Nets to win because unfortunately my New York Knicks is not going to do it this year. But they're making a really strong push. Got to give it to Coach Thibodeau. Coach Thibodeau was actually the coach at Harvard, the assistant coach at Harvard when my man Ralph James played ball there. So you got to give it up to another New York guy. In addition to that, of course, you know, the Bucks won the Super Bowl. We talked about it last week, and we're going to keep talking about it. Tampa Bay, as you can see, I'm rooting for my man Ray McGuire for mayor. But, you know, you need that second home in Tampa because while you're dealing with that frost and driving in that black ice, you know you want that beach house in St. Pete. You know you want that. You know you want the blue waters as well. So come to another championship city, live that good life. You could live in 2 states. I plan on doing it. Come join me. But in the meantime, if you are in New York City, make sure you register to vote and make sure you look up Ray McGuire, rayformayor.com. He's dropping jewels within the next 100 days once he's elected, because he will be the mayor of New York City. I'm predicting it. And guess what? He's planning on putting 500,000 jobs in the place to be. He's planning on reforming the whole housing to make sure that there's ways to reduce homelessness. And he's also addressing, you know, making sure that even the big corporations can work with the small business owners so that they can have incentives. And he plans on providing an incentive for small business owners where the sales tax will serve as a relief so that they can put more money into employees. So what other leader out there, and I'm not going to name any names, but all these candidates, all these 29 other candidates, because one candidate just dropped, all these other 29 other candidates, what is their plan and what are they doing for my people, right? So check out Ray McGuire, Ray for Mayor. He's the man for us. In addition to that, I want to touch base on my man Londell, Make Millions, McMillions with Source Magazine. He got Source streaming now on Roku, Google Play, Amazon. It's going down. Source streaming. He's looking for filmmakers. The opportunity is yours. Got to give a big shout out to my man in heaven, in power, Big L. That's right, Big L. There was a point in which we were in discussions in which we was going to manage him right before he was get ready to sign with Rockefeller Records. As a matter of fact, the person that was going to be bringing him in was Damon Dash. And we're going to talk a little bit about that during our program today. Also, I want to touch base on this Thursday and Friday. We have a 30-year reunion with my man Haq Islam. Haq Islam used to be a record exec over at Universal. He was the one that brought in Drew Hill, and he was the one that did a lot of parties at Howard University. He attended the Howard University, and now he's doing a almost like a homecoming on Clubhouse. So if you want to get on Clubhouse, now's the time to do it. And if you need an invite, text your boy, because I got like 7 of them. So we only gonna reserve one to a good listener. Text me 917-540-8274. And without further ado, let's talk about my man here, because my man is doing big things. Now, this is not the big show like our boy Fat Joe, but this man is doing big things. And I'm going to tell you why he's doing big things. At the end of the day, this gentleman is really changing the education infrastructure from within. So a lot of times everybody talks about, well, our education in the inner city, we got to do better, so on and so forth. But no one is coming up with a plan. No one's coming up with a system. The other thing he's also addressing is the opportunity for teachers and school administrators to still earn a really good living while giving of themselves. So with that being said, let me hold on. Got to get my right bio. Here we go. So this gentleman launched this program off school grounds in March of 2020. This man is an experienced educator, leader, and an executive coach. As you can tell, look how dapper he is. And he got the pink on. You know what I'm saying? He got the pink on it and the cap with the OSG on it. My man, you know he's from up top. You know he must be from New York. But in addition to that, during the pandemic, he noticed that there was an issue, there was a problem. People were frustrated on how to teach these kids in a virtual world. And what he decided to do was grab all the school leaders as a mentor and create a virtual platform to create that safe space for school leaders. And this virtual platform fosters the development of innovative leadership practices that allow school leaders to exchange ideas and advance educational opportunities for students of color. He started with a small amount of leaders, and now he's grown it to over 90, and it's still growing. And he has been consistent with it.
No doubt.
In addition to that, he's been inviting celebrity guests, everyone from Ralph McDaniels from Video Music Box, DJ Red Alert, Chuck D from Public Enemy, Dougie Fresh, and last but not least, Dame Dash. And this is presented by his own company, In Our Best Interest. All right. So without further ado, let's welcome to the show of Power Moves, Mr. Dennis B. McKesey, in the place to be of In Our Best Interest LLC.
What's going on, man? What's going on? Thank you for
What
having
it
me.
do, man? What it do? I mean, I couldn't even touch on all the things you've accomplished. With the Columbia business leadership, the fact that you worked with a Guggenheim. Guggenheim is big money, dogs. So, that's what we're gonna roll into our money segment. Tell us a little bit about yourself, man, and how do you able to manage making money while still educating folks? Because a lot of times, a lot of teachers, they are not paid accordingly, and yet you're making it happen. Look at the dapper man.
Yeah. What's going on, man? Yeah. So, to put it plain, man, I've been in education, man, for at least, it's almost 30 years now. And I started off as a school aide, became a teacher, assistant principal of a well-known school in New York City, Promise Academy, charter school run by Jeffrey Cannon in the Harlem Children's Zone.
Yes,
we were featured in the movie Waiting for Superman. We was featured in the book Whatever It Takes by Paul Tough and things like that. I, for the past 10 years now, have been running a leadership coaching firm where I work with principals all across the country on basically being able to create the best case scenario in their schools. I'm there to help them with their school reform, their school improvement plans, and things like that. So within that 10 years, the last 10 years, I've been able to accumulate a wealth of knowledge, but I've been also been able to accumulate a wealth of relationships, and having so many principles that I can tap into and that they tap into me was something that I think was I think in this instance it was fitting that I create an organization that represents them, such as OSG Off School Ground. So, education has been my passion. It's been something that I've loved forever. But one of the things that I always had, and I think you can understand this, is I didn't want to work for somebody forever. I felt that working as an educator and being able to go as far as you can, not necessarily what somebody else say you can. I think everybody runs the gamut, and I ran the gamut in this profession, and felt that I could do more for people and do more for schools and do more for school leaders by being their coach and being their mentor and things like that. So I was always one of those people. I think you understand it when it comes to being competitive. Every level that you go to is not enough. You're a teacher in a classroom. You only got 20 something students, so you know you master that, you want to go higher. Then you become an assistant principal. Now you over half the school, and that's not enough. And then you end up becoming a principal, and then you got over 400 or 500 kids that you're responsible for. And then eventually that's not enough. Then you end up saying to yourself, you know what? In order for me to make a real imprint in this profession that I love so much, I'm going to have to step out and become that entrepreneur, become that business owner that's going to open up a consulting firm, that which I've been doing successfully for the past 10 years. So that's really how I've gotten to this place. And the journey has been amazing. I've met a tremendous amount of people, but again, I get to do what I do and love it every single day because I work with principals that then in turn work with young people to make this, make their life much better and make the communities better.
What's interesting about what you just said is I loved it because you transitioned. Can you explain define what entrepreneurship means to you, and what is entrepreneurship in terms of the need that's in the educational space?
Yeah, it's funny. I had a Dame Dash, and I we're talking earlier today, and I was saying how, I think so many people call themselves entrepreneurs now because they're willing to do something and to try something more innovative. And I said that's only part of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship really entails risk taking and being able to say, you know what, there's no handrail anymore. There's no safety net. Sometimes when you become that entrepreneur, you got to say to yourself, listen, I believe in my ability, my expertise. I believe in my knowledge well enough that I'm going to say, you know what, I can't go to work for 9 to 5 today. I can't do that because it's hard for me to really become creative and innovative when I'm tired and I'm worn down by the end of the day. So when I think about entrepreneurship, I definitely think of risk taker, someone who's an expertise in what they do, and someone who's willing to monetize what it is, whatever it is that they're knowledgeable about. So I think as an educator, you oftentimes are very selfless in everything that you do. You think about everybody else. But then what happens is after you after you've retired in education, many people still don't have enough to actually live the life they want to live anyway. So I would always suggest that young people now start to think about, becoming an entrepreneur, but from an educational standpoint, because my knowledge that I can impart in up and coming principals are things that I know will be beneficial to them. But most importantly, if the next group of principals or school leaders behind me do the same thing, then I think we can leave this place leave education in a better space than how we found it. So as an educator and an entrepreneur, I recognize the importance to bring your expertise and your willingness to troubleshoot and to actually monetize what it is that you know really, really well. So as a consultant, I really understand the work. I understand that my reputation as a successful school leader has has really helped me to attach, to be attached to so many schools across the country as well. So I definitely feel like entrepreneurship is just not exactly the idea of starting something. Like you really got a true entrepreneur really does take a leap of faith and do things that most people probably wouldn't do. And so I was saying to Dame how it was funny. For 10 years now, I've had to pay my own health insurance, you know what I'm saying, for my family, you
it's a
know, and
that's a big deal.
absolutely. And people take that for granted because when you got it, really you just pay a couple of dollars out your check, you don't even see it.
Right.
But for me, it was different. You know what I mean? When you have to pay a health insurance bill that's the equivalent to your mortgage every month just to make sure that your family are well taken care of, you'll find a way to be creative and innovative and tap into all the entrepreneurial attributes that you have because there's no turning back. I would never desired to go back into working for anybody since I left.
That I love that you talked about that because that is so real. People don't understand the bennies that you get from work, but when you become an entrepreneur, you step out on your own and you have to buy your own health insurance. Woo! It's a totally different ball game. And so let's talk about the business of education because a lot of times people think of it as a fringe benefit, right? Us growing up, I went to private school all the way through, but during the summer, I used to go to PS 92 in Brooklyn and used to get the free breakfast, the free lunch was disgusting, but but it was free food. But you take all that stuff for granted. And I was just looking at a statistic, and they say that each student approximately gets $14,439 from the government in education. What in the world does that cover, bro? And is it really used properly? And what do you think should be done? And is there a gap in terms of entrepreneurial opportunity when it comes down to that?
Yeah, I actually think it's even more than that now. Schools spend in excess, I think, of either 16 to even 18,000 per student. And you got to think, right? The expenditures are very real. You're talking about salaries, you're talking about curriculum materials, you're talking about technology, special needs services for kids who need it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you got to understand that I think every principal does the best job that they can by stretching every dollar. One thing that I did find in terms of um, what school leaders probably need a little bit more support with is actual budgeting. Becoming a principal is so many things that are, at times seem to be so much more important. That when you got families that are struggling, when you got students that are struggling, when you got teachers that are struggling, when you're trying to get test scores to a place where it's respectable and things like that, budgeting just becomes that thing where although it's important, it's not as important as those other things that I just mentioned. And so what happens is people walk into this profession with very little knowledge of how to budget 5 million, $10 million. That's what a school leader is supposed to do.
Mm.
I was posed, someone posed a question to me earlier for a grant that I'm applying for, and they said to me, "Yo, what would you do with $20 million in terms of being able to support your organization, being able to support the community and schools and things like that?" And I had to be honest and say, "Listen, I don't know. I really don't know because I've never had $20 million." And so you can imagine what a principal who's never had $5 million, probably never even had $500,000. Now you're asking them to budget it without the proper training. So I think that when a person's ill-equipped to handle that kind of money, there's going to be some errors made. There's going to be some slippage when it comes to the amount of money that's allocated to young people. And so what ends up happening is a principal sees that there's a need to provide more teachers or more staff for kids. And what ends up happening is they hire them even though they can't afford it. And so
Mm.
schools now, many schools now are in the red. Many schools right now have a deficit. And I think it's because principals are doing their darndest to help move their kids forward. And sometimes, I think we both can understand it from where we've come from, that sometimes you got to borrow from Peter to pay Paul. And that's what principals are doing in many instances, but they're doing it for a good purpose and they're doing it for a good reason. And I'll give you a quick illustration of how funding actually truly works, at least from the federal government. remember, all this money starts in Washington, D.C. And then from Washington, D.C., it takes a plane over to New York City, New York State, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's up in Albany.
Right.
So between Washington, D.C. and New York State, you gotta there is this leakage of fund that's going to just naturally and organically fall from the sky. Literally, people, the money, if there was $50 million that's in Washington initially going to New York State, by the time it gets to New York State, it's no longer $50 million
Mm-hmm.
because of the expenses that's accrued getting to New York State. Now
Mm-hmm.
New York State gets the money and they say, well, we got all these counties up from New York State all the way down to New York City. And then every time, every level they go to, money's also being siphoned again because you're going to have to hire task force, administrative people, and all that on the state level. And so by the time it gets down to say Westchester, it's a little bit less than it's even less than what it was when it got to the state. But then now when you get to New York City, when you get to Brooklyn, you get to Queens, you get to Harlem, it's even less money that actually gets down to the young people. So you got to think every move that dollar makes, it also employs somebody else. It employs somebody. So the federal government isn't saying, I gave you $50 million, don't hire nobody. No, they gave you $50 million. You do what you want to do with it. And sometimes the mismanagement doesn't happen on a school level, but the mismanagement actually happens before it even reaches the school level. So I think in defense of principals, when they say they don't have money or they don't have enough money, it's a fact. Many of them are actually operating with very little budgets, and I know them personally, and I work with many of them personally. Some of them I actually work for free, just because I know that their budgets um, can't sustain my services, but because I believe in what they're doing, I'm willing to provide those services for free. So, um, I truly understand the conversation when it comes to budgeting, but I do say it's a little bit more complex than most people would want to believe because you never get what people promise you. And that just how it is. I mean, most people, remember when we were young and we knew what we were supposed to get paid every week until it was taxed, and you were like, whoa, I didn't know that was supposed to happen. So
Uncle
believe it or
Sam
not,
ain't my uncle.
absolutely. So that's what ends up happening with principals is that money that is somewhat promised to them, it doesn't always come in the same amount that it was promised.
you know, Man, that's it. I love the fact that you're giving us the backstory and the inside scoop. About 3 years ago, I was watching Bloomberg West, where Emily Chang was interviewing the man behind Kleiner Perkins, Mr. John Doerr, who he's the man behind getting Google up and running, Amazon. And she asked him, what's going to be the three main areas these venture capitalists are going to go should be focusing on and why. And his three were mobile devices, because the emerging markets are going to expand. Now keep this in mind, this was 3 years ago. He
Mm-hmm.
said emerging markets are going to expand. You're going to have people's phone contacts in the cloud. He said number two, AR, not VR, but AR, where you're going to have, the Pokemons and all that stuff. He predicted all of that. That's going to be the next. And then he said the third, which he's also excited about, is education, is the next money trend in tech. And with that came there's Khan Academy, there's Kajabi, there's a whole bunch of stuff. As a matter of fact, is that something that you guys are working on as well?
Absolutely. You got to think, right? I talk with folks about blended learning and remote learning and things like that in the sense of we didn't realize we didn't realize the importance of educating people remotely or in a blended fashion until we had no choice. But if you go back to the 1960s, blended learning was actually introduced back then. It wasn't until we got to the 1990s, 1998 to be exact, where blended learning actually got its name, where education was was supposed to be both virtual as well as in person. But what happened was we never, that trend that you speak of, you talk about something that happened 3 years ago. Imagine technology and blended learning was something that took place 30 plus years ago. And we didn't jump on that trend. We didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand it. From, from when the time you and I were in school, there was computers in school.
Yeah.
But just like what happened with our textbooks, the teacher never let us take it home. And then when we did take it home, we had to wrap it in paper bags,
In
right?
paper bag
So
or a
we
plastic
had to,
bag, in a
or plastic.
ShopRite bag.
Exactly. We had to wrap that up. But you got to think, why did we wait so long to have? Why did we wait so long to allow young people to take computers home, laptops home, iPads home? Because here's where the problem came in. It's not because they necessarily needed the computers at home, but it would have helped us to identify a problem that exists right now, which is that technological divide. That we now know that there are families out here that don't have hotspots, that don't have internet in their homes and things like that. As a school leader, our responsibility is to scan the community and see what the needs are and provide that. So if you say 20% of my school don't have hotspots or don't have internet service, it's easier to kind of go to, Sprint, Verizon, T-Mobile, and say, listen, I need some hotspots for my kids. You know, I have some money in my budget. I can, if you can kind of give me a discounted rate, or if you can donate it, fine. That'd be great. But I think when they talk about these trends, we have to understand as educators that those trends are really exist, that those trends really do exist. And so when you're talking about in terms of how much money can be made from that, listen, that's where we have to now understand when we talk about this e-learning that's going to be taking place. Distance learning is not going anywhere. There's going to be less and less children on the physical campuses. So we got to understand that now there's got to be more around project-based learning that's going to take place in the classroom and at home. And then now most families are being asked to be able to work from home as well. So
Mm-hmm.
by working from home as a parent, if I feel it may be a little bit safer for my child to stay at home with me, then that's what they're going to be. So in terms of understanding that tech trend, we understand that we're never going back to a place where all 100% of the school population's in school at the same time, with unless we get a full vaccination, everybody's get fully vaccinated. And so right now we got to think about, well, what is technology for us? And so when I think about this conversation is made easier because of technology. So I'm never going to be one to villainize it. I got to say to myself, how do I still become an amazing consultant by using this technology? And that's what entrepreneurship is about, is being able to reinvent yourself when when the tides turn, when the world gets flipped upside down, that you're not sitting there worried about how am I going to eat. Because if as an entrepreneur you've been doing it for 10 years, you know that evolution is a part of is part of your build, is part of who you are. So I truly say that that trend of tech, it 100% is accurate. And if you don't take advantage of it, we're going to be left behind again.
So I love that you're talking about the importance of not getting left behind again in the digital divide, because the digital divide is real in terms of, not having not all students have access to an iPad. They don't have access to laptops. They don't even have access to the actual Wi-Fi. As a matter of fact, Ray McGuire talks about it, and it's crazy because in New York City, it's almost a monopoly. It's Optimum. That's it.
Yeah.
All the other cable companies, some of them can barely, even Verizon Fios can barely get into certain areas. It's ridiculous.
But
And
Joel,
so,
but let me just say that. But Joel, let me just say though. But it's important though. I mean, as a former school leader and one who now coaches school leaders across this country, one of the things I remind them of is our responsibility to have a pulse on the community and know what the needs are. And so, even if that is the case, where Optimum is the monopoly, the end of the that's still not a reason for us to not have followed the trend and figured out ways that we can alleviate these families from this problem, right? I think if we have money in our budget, if we know how to go and attack grants and write proposals to get those things in our schools, we should. And I think as a school leader, I'm always about, I'm results driven. I'm about action. I'm about making sure that people understand that we can no longer blame people for the things that we don't have. And so as a school leader, I recognize that when there's a need, we supposed to know what that need is. When I was in Harlem as a principal, we realized that there was no healthy food. There was no healthy food to be found. On every corner, there was a Wendy's, there was a McDonald's, there was, a Dunkin'
Kennedy
Donuts.
Fried Chicken.
It can be fried chicken, you know what I'm saying? And so what ends up happening is we then have to say to ourselves, you know what? If they don't, if our community doesn't have those things readily available to them, let's bring it to us. And so what we end up doing is that we end up getting, we reached out to a couple of farms upstate, and we would do a farmers market every month where families would come to the school and just with pennies on a dollar, just come and get as much fresh produce as you possibly can, as much as you can possibly carry. And so I say that because that's a person understanding the need of the community and doing something about it. Good friends of mine who are principals, like Akbar Cook, realized in Newark, New Jersey, that kids were being killed during a certain time of the evening in the summer. So he
Mm-hmm.
decided to start a lights on program where those same young people can actually use his gym from 6 to 11, and almost immediately the killing stopped. Why? Because the young people had places to go and things to do. And
That's
that's just
right.
one of, there's just so many principals out here that are doing just that, that I definitely want to take it from that perspective that most school leaders are out here trying to find a way to to enhance and to develop their communities that they serve.
Let's touch upon and we're going to go into our power segment. Let's touch on the fact of the fact that as a former leader, school leader, education leader, and now you establish your own LLC, right? You went through that process, and let's keep it 100. You making more money than you was doing before, weren't you?
No question. No question.
All right.
No question.
So why is that model needs to be duplicated with more teachers, in your opinion?
Um, one, I think I think when you kind of look at, talk about trends, you look at what retirement looks like for most people now. And as a young person, you understand that if you think that in education, you're going to be an educator for the next 30 years and you're going to retire as an educator, I think those days are behind us now. That because education is changing so much, it's causing a strain on people's emotions. And so people are actually getting into leadership positions in education a lot sooner, which means you hit a ceiling a lot sooner. So, what happens when you become a principal? Where do you go after that? And you're only 31 years old. I was 31 years old when I was a principal.
Mm.
I left principalship when I was 41, 42. What was I supposed to do at that point? Okay, yeah, the next logical move would be go up to superintendent. Okay, let's say I'll be a superintendent for the next 5 years, 10 years. Okay, that's 51 years old. What am I supposed to do after 51? So and so you end up realizing that the finish line keeps moving, and you got to realize that when it's all said and done, you have to be willing to recognize that the finish line has changed and has moved. Listen, my dad worked 30 years in the post office, and I saw what it was for him to live on a fixed income, and I didn't want that. Like, I didn't want, when my father was on this fixed income, then he's able to pay his rent, buy a couple of things here and there. Now he's stuck for the next 28 days of how he's supposed to live. So I took a lot from my dad's experience and my mom's experience of, just recognizing that retirement and pensions and stuff like that are just not going to be enough. And there aren't enough of us that understand investment, so people aren't investing money. And so you got to ask yourself, if you don't invest in anything, invest in yourself. Get an LLC, take your expertise and go and teach somebody the thing that you know so well. So if you're a great teacher, why won't you go and teach somebody else? Why won't you go and teach conferences? Why wouldn't you go and conduct workshops and all that kind of stuff and monetize that? So I truly believe that when you think about where we're going to be, if there's a teacher right now that's 21 years old, 25 years old, what are you going to do for the next 35 to 40 years? I don't think you're going to be in education from the formal, in a formal way. So you got to say to yourself, Why don't you create yourself an LLC? Become an entrepreneur. Become that person who's willing to take a risk and say to yourself, you know what? I believe in me. I believe in my talent and my expertise, and move forward with that. So I actually started my LLC when I was a principal. I was still a principal.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't, I utilized it because I was getting speaking engagements where people would reach out to me, and pay me thousands of dollars to come and speak at conferences and stuff like that. So I felt like, you know what, therein lies another stream, another income stream. So let's create the LLC and things like that. And so that's why I think it's important that we start to understand that LLCs, non for profits, or any other form of business structure of that sort is something that we all got to take advantage of, because it gives you an opportunity to make a decision. If you wake up tomorrow and says, I don't want to do that anymore, okay, you got an LLC. Go jump into that. Go do that thing that you were so passionate
Talk to us about how did you develop your talents and your power? How did you, because when you go to school, they really teach you to just be a robot.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Follow this and be a great principal. And like you said, and then you're almost like a deer with the headlights, like, okay, what do I do next? Right? So how did you develop your negotiating skills, your skills in creating a team, and developing how to create revenues and things of that nature? How did you
Well,
tap
well,
into that power?
Well, one of the things I stress with folks is that education in itself doesn't exist in a silo. Like if I everything that I think happens in education happens in entertainment, happens in sports, happens in politics. And so if you're going to be successful at running a school, you have to be able to you have to know you're going to have to know how to negotiate, because you may get a parent who comes in who's pissed off about something. You better find a way to
It's not. That's not
negotiate
a maybe. That's not a maybe, bro. That's a. If you a parent, if you a parent, like I'm a parent, it's going down.
Absolutely. And so I got to negotiate that, right? The other thing is when you're talking about, truly understanding how to build a team. Well, again, I'm responsible for 100 staff members. I'm responsible for all of the teachers and faculty while I was a principal. So I had to learn how to become, a transformative leader that's able to help to develop the followers or the people that work for me. And so when you think about it from that lens, I'm just saying I don't want anybody to think about education as this thing that no one understands unless you're an educator. Because really successful businesses are run very similar. They're run very, very similar. And again, go back to what I mentioned earlier about budgeting. If in a business you don't know how to budget well, most likely your company is going to fail.
That's
So when
right.
you think about educators, think about leadership, educational leadership. If the principal's having a hard time managing their budget, it's very difficult for them to ever reach a level of proficiency, or to move their school to the place where the kids are performing really, really high. So you got to have all of those same skills. And so the transition into me, starting my own company and becoming my own boss was very similar. It was an easy transition for me because I took my role and responsibility as a school leader very serious. And I was a very high performing school in New York City, very high performing school in New York State. I mean, again, books and movies have been written about my school, so clearly there were things that we did well. But I think a lot of it still had to stem from what my expertise was as a leader.
Well, y'all got that American Express commercial. Y'all
There
got
you go.
that. y'all got some money from Diddy, and that helped him create his school. So let's talk about curriculum, bro.
Mhm.
My man, Dr. Claude Anderson, Powernomics. Why aren't these in our schools, bro? What? How can we get this? This is the plug for my man. How can we get this and this black labor, white wealth? How do we get those in the schools? And you know what? And while I'm at it, I believe we should Dame should get a book because he needs a book on negotiating. because he's a pit bull when it comes to the negotiating tables, bro. So we need to help him create a book. Let's make it happen. But could you share with me what's the bureaucracy of how come those books are not in our schools and our history is all jacked up?
Well, I think the problem is that, even if you put the books in the schools, if the adults don't know how to manage money and don't understand economics and don't understand how to create wealth, the book is just going to collect dust like every other book. You know what I'm saying? We got to start by at least educating the educators of the importance of power, you know, powernomics, power economics, you know, just all of the wealth building opportunities that are available. You know what I'm saying? If a if a teacher or principal doesn't understand what it means to be wealthy, it's very difficult to teach that. And so we got to make sure that, I think when you talk about the two authors that you just mentioned, it's important that they get out there and speak to the audience of educators who are just as willing to become wealthy as anybody else. But
Mm,
unfortunately, but unfortunately, it's hard. It's hard for people who devote so much time to somebody else's children and to give up so much of their time every day to find time for themselves. So you got to think the average educator is waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, probably leaving their house by 6, getting to their job by 7, work all day and probably don't get back home till 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. So you're talking about people that are out of their house 12, 11 hours a day. And by the time they get home, the last thing they want to care about is themselves because now they got to go home and take care of their families and a few other things. So I think it's important to realize that I don't think that people don't want to become successful, and I don't think that people don't want to be wealthy. I just think that, time, they've just run out of time when you think about how much they devote to things and to people outside of their household. So I think if those books are going to mean anything, it has to start meaning something to the adults who are being asked to teach it. And some people are content with making $100,000, $120,000, and being able to have, health care and all those things. Some people are just that's just who they are. And so
hmm
not everybody wants to be, yeah, and I find it hard to believe it, but it's true. Not everybody wants to be wealthy. Not everybody wants to have the headache of being out there and taking a risk as an entrepreneur. And so it's very similar to when I hear people say, well, there are some people who don't want to own homes. It's hard for me to understand that, but I believe it now. I understand because there are a lot of people who would rather rent and not deal with the headache.
Right.
So I think that when those two books in particular that you refer to, I mean, it's difficult to empower young people until we empower the adults first, because they're the ones who's going to deliver the message. If they don't know how it is and what it is to be financially secure or understand financial freedom, there's no way they can teach that.
That sounds like to me that these folks need to be fired because
Yeah,
I, I mean, $100,000. I mean, uh, being a millionaire is the new middle class,
hmm
right? Being a millionaire is a new middle class, and for our children to be empowered, you got to have the money, you got to have the economics. We got to teach them, and that's what's going to make things interesting. So I get it. We're getting up early. I do it. I'm 5 o'clock. I'm 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, but at the end of the day, we got to understand what our mission is, and for us as a community to raise the bar. So I'm quick to tell a leader, listen, you got to do better. We have to, because at the end of the day, like you said, you mentioned a very good point. How are the kids going to learn if the leaders are not doing it?
absolutely. But see, we got to remember, because I am in a leadership position doesn't necessarily make me a leader, right? There are
Yes.
people. I mean, we've seen it in our country. We've seen it in our politicians. Like, you can be in a place of leadership and still not be a leader. And I think that too, people got to remember is that, you know, I think people like to believe that all leaders are born. No, some are made too. And when you don't have an understanding of what it means to be a great leader. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to empower other people to do just the same. There are schools across this country that are doing horrible. And you got to look at the leadership of those schools and ask the question, how in the hell are you allowing that to happen? And you can't blame the kids. You can't blame the community. You can't even blame your teachers. As a school leader, if your school is failing year after year after year, we have to do some reflection and reflecting and ask whether or not we are equipped to do this job. And we know that sometimes people are placed in leadership positions that they haven't earned. So
Hmm.
it's very complicated to assume that everybody that's in that leadership role would know the importance of empowering a community when it comes to economics, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work as smoothly, might I add. It doesn't work that, because if that's not who you are, it's not who you are. Eventually you'll be exposed for it. You can tell me you're rich all you want, but eventually, when I see you with the fake rollie, or when I see you pull up with fake diamonds in your ear and things like that, or you're wearing a fake, wearing some fake Dior shoes and sneakers and stuff like those things, eventually will be exposed. And what happens in education is that what's being exposed is that leadership still needs developing, that leadership still needs to be cultivated, and the leadership still needs to be enhanced in many people who are running schools across this country. And so the last thing a person is thinking about when they're struggling just to run a school is what books to actually put in front of kids.
Hmm.
Unfortunately.
So talk about, how did you attract your power? Like, how did you and Dame kind of get together, and really what's next?
Yeah. So, when I started OSG, when I started Off School Grounds, one of the things that I wanted to happen, was in addition to creating that safe space for school leaders and things like that, what I wanted to do was to bring in people who are going to be inspirational to the principals. Because you got to remember, back in March and April, everybody was at a low, emotionally was drained, didn't know what to do, and sometimes you start questioning yourself. And so I decided that, a good friend of mine, Lays Elliott from the world famous MOP, very, very close friend of mine, I said, "Oh, Lays, I need to tap into you and my boy LA Sunshine from the Treacherous Three. I need to bring in some, entertainers that will pump these principles up after I do my thing." And so, so Lays was like, "D, count me in." LA was like, "Count me in." And so the first week, we got on the phone with VJ Ralph McDaniels from Video Music Box, and I talked to him about it. He was like, "Yo, ID, don't worry about it. I'm there." So he came that first week. We had about 20 something principals in the room. When they saw Ralph McDaniels, they bugged out. Because remember, most of us used to run home to watch Video Music Box. If you're
That's
40,
right.
40 something years old, you ran home to watch Video Music Box. So for them to actually have Ralph McDaniels in a Zoom conference with them, it was like, wow. So for a moment, even if it was for that moment, they forgot COVID existed. They forgot what was going on outside of the Zoom room at that point. Then the um, next week we brought in Red Alert. Again, most of us went home, ran home on Saturday nights to listen to DJ Red Alert. He came in, same thing. Then we brought in Chuck D from Public Enemy, was amazing. Big Daddy Kane was amazing. And then I think it was my fifth week. I brought in Dougie Fresh and Dame Dash. Brought them both in to meet with the principals and stuff like that. And so we kind of then, at that particular point, um, build those relationships with these entertainers, and it felt organic. Like they were the ones looking at us as superheroes, when in all actuality, we were looking at them as, superheroes. So it was a mutual respect for one another, which was extremely impressive to see and to hear. So the funny part about Dame is Dame got there in April. Dame has not missed an OSG meetup, that, because I call it the meetup, every Thursday. Every single Thursday, Dame has been there since April. Has not missed one. Has not missed one at all. And one of the things that Dame and I had, we had in common was when you think about what he did with Rockefeller, and you think about what he did with by putting such strong forces together for a record label, he saw the same thing in OSG. And he saw me bringing principals from New York, New Jersey, South Carolina, Compton, Kentucky, Tennessee, bringing big dogs in the room, and they all fly. You know what I'm saying? They all dress fly. They all, they can all relate to the culture and everything else. And so what Dean was like, yo, D, and probably, and again, depending on who you ask, some people take this the wrong way. But Dame said, D, like I wish Rockefeller was what I see OSG is right now. And I felt that that was a major compliment by him saying, yo, D, if I was able to do what you're doing right now with OSG, Rockefeller would have been even bigger than what it was. And I took that as a major, major, major compliment from him. And from there, I think, when you understand Dame, Dame is the kind of dude who, he respects people who hustle and grind just like he does, and people who understand that mindset. And so when Dame and I kind of connected by way of Lays Elliott, because Lays, obviously MOP used to be part of Rockefeller.
Yep.
So he brought Dame on. And from there, Dame and I kind of clicked up pretty easy because at that point, Dame wasn't a celebrity to me. Dame was a peer. You know what I'm saying? Because what Dame was doing in terms of running his companies and his organizations, I was doing the same thing. So I didn't need to go to him and get nothing other than wisdom, knowledge, and understanding about how to continue to be great. So I didn't go with my hand out saying, "Hey, Dame, can you sign this autograph? Can you give me your autograph?" That type of stuff. He was able to respect me just as much as I respected him. And so from that point forward, Dame and I just been real close. Our families are pretty close. My wife and his wife, his fiance Rocky, are very close. We went out to visit him a couple of times in LA and things like that. So he got to spend some time with my family and stuff. So I think Dame in a nutshell is there's the Dame that everybody else sees, and the boisterous, the loud, sometimes obnoxious dude. But the reality of it is that that helped make Rockefeller extremely rich and wealthy because he was willing to talk and to be something. He was proud of his brand. He let everybody know that I'm down with the Rock. The Rock is mine. And everybody looked at that and said, you know what? He can be a bit much to deal with. But you got to say, if you take him out of the equation, I doubt that we would be talking about the culture of hip hop the way we do now. So, like I said, the love and respect that Dame and I both have for one another is something that's genuine. And as I said, I'm just as much of an influence on Dame's life as he is on mine at this point.
Well, I think what in my opinion, and I talk to folks in my circle, Dame is the Nat Turner of business in our generation.
Yes.
Diddy is the marketing person, and Diddy would get up in your face as well. But the difference is Nat is the bull. I mean not Nat. Dame is the bulldog. Like, you not taking his stuff, and he had full ownership. With that being said, with your entrepreneurial brain and what you do, and I know exactly what he's talking about, the organization of what you're doing, because if Rockefeller had the network in all those cities
Yes.
that had the allegiance to him, it's over. So I understand that. With that being said, now you guys have come together. What's next? What's the vision of you two moguls coming? And now you got the Dame Dash Studios. I support it. I got my year subscription.
Yeah. That's
so
what's up.
so talk to me about what's next, and how can we got 5 minutes. So this is your time to promote. What's next, and how can we support you?
Yeah. I think, it's weird, right? When people ask that question, what's next? And, OSG is approaching 1 year in its formation. And to say that I knew that this is where I would be 11 months in, is it would be a lie. You know what I'm saying? So in terms of saying, well, what's next? Um, I can't even say I have a clear picture of what that is outside of just continuing to be better at what we did. So throughout the last 11 months, we continue to coach and to develop school leaders across the country. We've included, other clinicians and legal scholars and journalists and public analysts, analysts and public officials, elected officials into OSG to actually look at some of the issues that are going on with education, and let's form, a strong coalition of people who are going to solve problems for definitely underserved and marginalized communities, like many of the ones that we talk about in Brooklyn and Queens, Harlem, Chicago, Newark, New Jersey, and things like that. So I think right now, if I could say what I would say, it looks like in the next couple of years, I think OSG is going to continue to to blaze the trail of people who are not just going to talk about the issues that are plaguing education, especially in our inner city communities, but we're going to be doing something about it with all of the partnerships that we have, with all the people that I mentioned, with all of the elected officials and entertainers and athletes and everybody else. I think everybody has a common goal, which is that they want to leave this place in a better situation than how we received it. So, young people is that one way that everybody can unify their abilities. And so, when I think about what's next, just continuing to build, continuing to make education and communities that are struggling at this point, give them hope to succeed. And so, a couple of things that we've done recently, Dane, myself, the Beyond Meat folks, we actually partnered together to do a project, an initiative called Everybody Eats around Thanksgiving and Christmas, where we literally receive over 500 boxes of Beyond Meat, the healthy um, meat supplement and meat choice and things like that. And so we went to at least a dozen schools from New York, New Jersey, and a few other places, and actually fed the community around the time when we felt that they needed it the most. We had toy drives as well, and those are the things that we look to try to help. But also too, now we're having conversations with some of the mayoral candidates here in New York City as well, talking to them about the importance
Are
of
you talking? Are you
kind
talking
of.
to my man Ray?
I haven't talked to him yet, but I know you're gonna connect me with him. So you know who who we talked to a couple of weeks ago. We talked to Eric Adams a couple of weeks ago, and a couple of weeks from now we're gonna be speaking with Maya Wiley as
Maya
well.
Wiley, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna be talking to her as well. But ideally, what it is it's not about. I think when we talk to elected officials, it's not so much about the endorsements. It's about letting them know that you got a group of people that care about kids and care about education, and we're going to make sure that you hear from us when we think that something needs to be done for our kids. And so I think all of the things that we're talking about, being us being able to connect to them and say, listen, hey, 30% of the kids in New York City still don't have a hotspot. What are you guys going to do as elected officials to resolve that issue? And us being in their face about it, never disrespectful, but us letting them know we talk to you guys about this. And in this circle are school leaders from across the country. So if you help solve this problem in New York, we can solve it in Compton. We can solve it in Tennessee. We can solve it, in Newark, New Jersey. So I think that's when I say what's next, that and obviously Dane being a huge part of that, and us continuing to help the world to see the Dame Dash that we see every week, which is somebody who's very passionate about education. We see it, you see how he loves his son Dusko. You see the passion that he has for that young
I mean, he
that
got
young man Ray.
he got love for all his kids, man. I mean, I don't know him personally, but
Hmm.
I mentored one of his cousins, and I knew another one of his cousins when he did Digital Mafia. But what people don't understand about Dame, he got a big heart. Um,
Absolutely,
he got a real big
absolutely.
heart, and what happens is that he gets misunderstood because he's very passionate. You know, I grew up with Irv Gotti. Irv Gotti and Dame and the Waz from the
Rough Riders.
Rough Riders. everybody's passionate. This is how it is. And he's a Harlem cat. I'm a Brooklyn cat. It is what it is. But you know what? I wish we had more time. We're going to have to bring you back again. But you know what?
It'd be my pleasure.
How do we support you? How do we do, is Tampa on the map? Because as a matter of fact, there's an assistant principal at my daughter's school. He's a brother. I'll make sure I'll put him in with you as well. We can get on the platform. But, how can we support you?
Yeah, well, I think the major thing is obviously get over to support us to start with on social media. Get over to the official OSG on Instagram, the official OSG on YouTube, the official OSG on Facebook. Let's start by doing that first, and then secondly, reaching out to us as well through those platforms as well, letting us know what's going on in your city, and letting us know that you need support by way of educational representation from school leaders and other people who have a desire to make those changes. So I think it's funny when, again, somebody asked me that question before. It's like, how can we support? And the reality of it is, if you can see and hear the passion that I have for educators and education and for young people, I mean, I think it's pretty easy to know how to support me. Get out there and do what you got to do in your own community. And if you need us, to just holler, So I definitely will just leave it there.
Excellent. Well, once again, another great episode of Power Moves with the infamous Dennis McKesey in the place to be from Westchester, making it rain.
Money earning Mount Vernon is where I'm from. Money earning Mount Vernon.
Oh, you from Money earning? So you got to know the Huggins family, Reggie Huggins.
Oh,
that's my bro, Jeff Red. Okay. So you from that school. But anyway, once again, this is Power Moves, where celebrities, athletes, key influential executives share how they make money, how they attract power, and how they earn respect. We'll see you next week, baby.